Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to the Life, Death, and Space Between podcast. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium. I know it seems like a strange combination, but that gives me a unique view of life and death. Death can be scary. I get that. That's why I'm doing this. I want to help people explore life, death, and what it all means. We are born and we die. What we do in the middle is the space between. I want to welcome you to my first podcast, which I'm super excited about. Today, the tables will be turned. Normally, I'm going to be doing interviews and exploring with my guests different perspectives on death and how it can transform your life in a good way. But today, I'm going to be interviewed by my very good friend and journalist, Allison Kaden. So, Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, hello, everyone, and hi, Amy. I should note that I'm on the phone with you in New York, and Amy is in Chicago.
Yep.
But we have been friends for how many years at this point?
25,
A long time. What did you say?
25 years, about, at this point?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. So, obviously, we have two different professions. But it makes kind of for an interesting conversation between the both of us. I think we have a lot to learn about each other. And I definitely learned something new about Amy a few months ago that you are going to learn about too. And I want to get started with Amy. Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your profession? What is your day-to-day?
So I am a clinical psychologist or therapist, and I've been doing this work for almost 15 years now in private practice. I started working with kids and made a transition to working with adults once I had kids of my own. So I have 3 kids. They are now 12, 9, and 4.5. So my day-to-day is spending time with them, but I also do work. So it's kind of that juggling like so many of us are used to doing.
Absolutely. You have 2 jobs.
Yeah, well, yes. And so that's, been my day-to-day is just working with people, kind of dealing with everyday life issues, and then coming home and dealing with my own.
So as a therapist, then, people come to you seeking basically help for problems they're going through, just they want to learn more about themselves. What is the nature of your practice?
Yeah, there's everything from anxiety and depression, grief and loss, and that's really where my interest in all of this kind of sprouted from, is that there's a lot of people that I find are struggling with grief and loss and unresolved grief and loss. So while that's not necessarily the huge focus of my practice, it does seem to come up constantly with basically everybody I see.
And so I think people may be tuning into this podcast because they have an interest in death, the afterlife. They have their own grief and loss. They have their own fear of death. And so I think what puts you in a really unique position is that you have a perspective that's different than most therapists, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about your personal relationship with death?
Sure. So this goes back a ways for me, and this is quite a story. And interrupt me at any time if you have any questions about it. So
no problem.
When I was 18 years old, I lost my aunt. I was in college at the time, and she had juvenile onset diabetes. She was sick for a very, very long time, since she was about 10 years old. But really, in the end, she struggled with what often happens with with diabetes is your organs start to shut down. And she was on the list for a pancreas, transplant. And while they were doing the pre-assessment for the transplant, one of the things that they noticed was that her heart was really weak. And so they needed to go in and do heart surgery in order to make sure that her heart, apparently at the time they had seen that she had several sort of small heart attacks that had gone undetected. And so they needed to do the surgery in order for her to get the pancreas transplant on her heart, because otherwise her heart wouldn't have withstood the surgery, wouldn't have withstood the transplant. So I was in college at the time. It was my freshman year. And I remember getting the call that she did not survive this surgery. Her heart was really...
Was this your first experience with death?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of people who had passed away. Like, I remember a girl that I had gone to camp with passed away, and another girl that I had traveled with abroad.
But this was a close family member, the first close family member that died, correct?
Yes. I mean, not great-grandparents and things like that, but my aunt was really like a mother to me. I mean, she was my mom's sister. She had gone through some difficult times, so she spent a ton of time at our house with my family. And so in a lot of ways, she was like a second mother to me. And when I got that call that she didn't survive the surgery, it was pretty breathtaking. I mean, I remember just falling to the ground and having to fly home by myself that night, not sort of knowing what was in store for me, because really this being the first close, tragic death in a way. I mean, it was well before her time. She was 48 years old. She was very young.
That's young. That is very young.
She had young kids who were in college and high school at the time, and my grandparents, her parents were still alive, and my grandfather was a physician, so he was a pediatrician, so her illness was really troubling as well because he couldn't save her. As a pediatrician, as any physician, you want to do whatever you can to save your child, but I think particularly when they develop a condition as a kid, it's even more frustrating.
Of course. But I want you to fast forward a certain amount of years, because I think so many people can think about it, and someone, close to you dies, it obviously is traumatic. You go through different periods of mourning and grief, and, obviously Mm-hmm. But fast forward to a few years when all of a sudden you had a strange experience regarding your aunt.
Right. So fast forward through college, towards the end of my college career, I started getting, I don't know if I would call it debilitating, but certainly panic attacks. Just this really, really intense anxiety around being able to support myself. And so there's a little bit of a backstory here. My aunt went through a divorce, and it became really stressful for her to financially support herself, and she didn't have a degree to fall back on, or she had a degree, but she hadn't worked in years. And so I really identified with that piece of her, and I began my own journey into therapy to try to deal with the anxiety, which at the time I related to her death, but not her life, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I knew that her death was really disturbing to me, but I didn't realize how her life and the role that her life played in my life and the intersection and how I kind of made sense of all that really affected me. And so for years in therapy, I struggled with how to make sense of this anxiety. And I started grad school at the time for psychology, and about probably my second year into grad school, shortly before her son was getting married, I experienced, at the time, what I thought was a dream.
Were you sleeping?
I was, yes, but it was like almost like that twilight state that you get when they, give you Novocaine for your wisdom teeth, like that type of sleep where you're.
So you were going to sleep at night. You were waking up in the morning.
I had just woken up and then sort of fallen back to sleep. So it was like that in between state.
Right.
And I saw a couple of images. The first one being my aunt was talking to me, and she said to me, "Tell your mom it's okay. I'm going to be at the wedding. She doesn't need to be upset about this." And then she said, "Tell Richie, my mom's brother, my uncle, her brother, my aunt's brother, that I hear him when he talks to me, and I know that he always talks to me when he's running and walking." And so,
what were basically the details she gave you about your mom?
So
what was your mom doing?
So my mom was standing at her kitchen sink washing dishes. Like I was like the visual that I saw was I was in she showed me my mom's kitchen. My mom's standing at the kitchen sink, looking out our window. So my kitchen sink, when you're doing dishes in my home that I grew up in, you look out the window into the backyard. And that's exactly where my mom was when my aunt
I know that
said
exact
to me,
spot.
Yeah, I know, right? We spent many a time sitting around my kitchen table. And she was just looking out. And I called my mom that morning when I woke up because this dream, and if you could see me, it would be dream in quotes, because it didn't feel like a dream. It felt, as you and I are talking today, that's how I was talking to my aunt. And I called my mom and I told her what happened, and she started crying. And I said, Mom, why are you crying? And she said, because last night I was standing at my kitchen sink and I was talking to Linda, and I said to her, I really wish you could be at the wedding. It would be so incredible for you to see this. And of course, at that point, I got the goosebumps all over. I started crying. My mom was crying. And I felt like, okay, I had a dream. And I followed that up with I reached out to one of my professors in grad school because it felt like more than a dream to me. And
what was your mom's reaction, though? What did she think it was?
Well, she couldn't quite understand it, especially because then I followed up and I talked to my uncle, and he validated a lot of what I had shared with him about the dream and the things that he shares with Linda, what's her name, that I would have never known. And
so Aunt Linda came to you. Mm-hmm. She said she basically gave you a vision of your mother having a conversation with her in a certain spot in her house. Mm-hmm. She did the same thing with her brother, your uncle.
Right.
The same sort of vision where he's doing this and he's talking to me, and didn't she give you a message to tell him?
The message was just basically like, I hear you, I know that you're talking to me, and I'm doing what I can to help.
And what was his response?
I mean, I think he was equally as floored. He is also a physician. So this is not a family of people who are hooey-wooey or,
You're scientific.
Right. As scientific and grounded as they come.
Yes.
And I think
I can vouch for that.
And I think that thank you. I think that's what made it even more kind of mind-blowing, was that this was not something that had been in our family. This was not something that anybody had really ever experienced before. And honestly, at the time, we all just kind of moved. I mean, I met with my professor. She gave me some books to read on this, and I just sort of moved on from it at that point.
And how old were you?
24?
24.
23,
okay.
24, yeah.
So the idea of the word medium, that hadn't popped into your head yet, or you were just you couldn't wrap your brain around it yet? You weren't willing to accept it?
I think that it was just sort of a one-off thing for me. Like I had some of the books that my professor who's now my friend, had recommended were about being a medium, like about mediumship, but I think at the time that was when John Edwards was on TV, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, but never thought much beyond that.
What was the professor's specialty? What did the professor teach?
She taught psychoanalytic psychotherapy.
So would you say that, what did you call it, hooey-booey or something like that?
Hooey-wooey. Hooey-wooey.
The whole idea of being a medium, being able to communicate from the dead or receive messages from the dead or see the dead, that's not something you would say is widely accepted in your field, correct?
Correct. I mean, I think it's, there's not... The science behind it is questionable. And honestly, part of my podcast moving forward is to explore some of those things, because I had remembered before this had even happened, she had spoken about quantum physics and string theory, and I had always felt a draw to some of these more the topics about consciousness and expanding levels of consciousness and things along those lines, but I never quite knew how to make sense of it all. Frankly, quantum physics and string theory still doesn't make a lot of sense to me, any sense to me, but I know that it ties in.
I'm going to have to Google both of those. I've heard the name of those, but unfortunately I'm going to have to Google them.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to explain it. I'm just going to hopefully have someone on in the future who can do that but we're
getting a little off topic because I want to direct you back. I want to know the next time you had an experience that was similar to that.
So shortly after my grandfather passed away, similar thing happened.
Which was when?
10 years ago.
Okay, so you were what, in your mid-30s? No, early 30s?
Are you going to say my age on here? No.
I'm not going to say your age. So you were what? So you were 14? No,
yeah, exactly. No. Yeah, so I was probably early 30s, let's just say.
Okay.
Might have been 15 years ago. Who knows? No. But, so similar situation before. Apparently there's something with people getting married and, dead relatives coming to talk to me, because he also came to me in a dream-ish state, sharing similar things with me about my cousin, things I wouldn't know, a nickname that her future husband called her, and I called her up. Similar situation. I told her what had happened. She started crying. Oh my God, you're exactly right. This is exactly what I've been thinking about. Thank you. And then
and this is all the same side of the family, correct? So this
two
is
different sides.
Your aunt's father?
No, two different sides.
Oh, other side of the family.
That was my mom's sister. This was my dad's father.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
yeah. So then I started, and actually that wasn't even the end of it all. Again, sort of dismissed that as, okay, these are just like one-off people coming to me. But when it really started to be more real for me was when I started feeling like my patients' relatives were coming to me.
Whoa, I don't think I knew that.
Yes. And
so your patients that you talked to, that you would be sleeping and their relatives would come and say, let's say your patient's name was Terry. Tell Terry I said this and tell Terry I said that.
Yes, or just sort of showing me pictures of for me, when I how I even feel about even saying this, because I still am not completely comfortable with it. But when I always see things, like things come through very visually to me. So there would be like little images or flashes of things. And then I would I never ever went into a session to say, oh, your dead relative came to me last night or anything.
You've never ever told a patient that?
No.
No,
Mm-mm.
okay.
And
they probably get a little freaked out.
Well, yeah, and frankly, that's not why. Now, if people hear this, I guess they'll know, but that's it feels like two very different sides of myself.
Well, what's interesting is I remember when you first told me about this was really only a few months ago, people should know. I remember you said you started hearing all these things, you're seeing these things, and you kind of felt bombarded by it, and you had reached out to another medium and you basically asked, what do I do? And they gave you some really good advice. And what was that?
Yeah. So when this all started happening, it became really intense for me. And so I worked with a woman for a couple of years who just helped me really kind of hone my skills and also turn if you've read anything about mediumship, kind of turn down my dial. So it doesn't feel like it's constant for me. And I don't put myself out there as a medium, and that's actually not even the point of why I'm sharing all of this. Like, I'm not going to stand out there and hang my sign up as a medium. And I can
say this, in high school, least likely to be a medium would be Dr. Robbins.
Thank you. Don't tell them don't say what I was most likely to be.
What'd you say?
I said, don't say what I was most likely to be.
But what, right? If you had picked anybody, out of our class in high school, I would not have picked you.
Right. And I think that's just because I consider myself a pretty grounded person, and not that mediums aren't grounded, because now that I've been in this world a little bit, I think I've met a lot of people who are incredibly grounded. But my perception of it was sort of that you were out there, like with crystals hanging around you, and
well, you were, yeah. You're not into new age. You're not new agey. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be that way, and I think that's what's sort of exciting about this is that a lot of people are kind of coming out of the closet and talking about this more.
Right. So you've been going through this then for over a decade. You've been. Is it something you feel like I should put it this way? You first told me about it, and my mouth dropped, of course, but at the same time, I'm also a skeptic, and that's just my nature as a journalist. I want to say, prove it to me, explain it to me. And what was interesting, I should preface this is a pretty interesting story. And so we were on a trip with some other friends from growing up, and we were sitting around. We had a beautiful day at the beach, and we were sitting around on a couch and drinking tequila in Mexico and having a great time. And, was it our friends egged me on to sort of interview you, or you asked me to interview you? I don't remember.
They egged you on, and you were saying, you were kind of saying, well, if you were, if I was interviewing someone or if I was doing a story on this is what I do. And I think one of our friends was like, do it. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Of course, I think I was a margarita in, but
it could have been the tequila talking.
Right, it might have been.
So we sat around, and we, were very relaxed, and I started to grill you, and I did it like I normally interview people. There were no kid gloves. I was skeptical. I asked you questions, and then I think I said to you, prove it to me. What did I say? I said, prove it to me. Do you see anyone around me, or can you talk to anyone in my life?
Right.
And what did you do?
I think you basically said, prove it. And, for everybody listening, that's like my biggest fear is that someone will want me to prove it to them and I can't. And that's has been my resistance to this. So you said, prove it to me. And I said, who's Jerry? I think were my words.
And what did I do?
Burst into tears.
I have never spontaneously cried like that, I don't think, in my entire life.
And I just started shaking, I think. And our friends were there, and everybody, there were 4 of us total. And I think maybe their mouths were like hanging on the floor.
They were on the floor. And so to tell everybody, Jerry, that's my grandfather who passed away when I was an early teen, when I was 13. And by the way, I told my mom this. Mom's like, Amy must have known Grandpa's name. And I said, I don't remember Amy's grandparents' names, and I've met them a bunch. There's no way.
Yeah, and your grandfather passed away before I even knew you.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
And I don't recall him, ever coming up in the course of conversations. Although, that was one of the things I think I said to you was, after I finished your reading, I said, what's going to happen is that you're going to go and you're going to tell people about what happened, and they're going to start questioning it. And they're going
to look for reasons to discount it, I guess.
Right.
Reasons to say, that's not possible, or how, she must have known.
Right. And I said to you, what I want you to do is really hold true what you were feeling in the moment when I said that, because that's what this is about. And frankly, that's what I want to do for people, is to expand their consciousness, to expand their openness, to expand their thinking around this stuff, because it can be healing in so many ways. And, part of my journey was that the therapy was really healing for my anxiety up until a point. But honestly, when I came to terms with and had my own understanding of what it means to die, that it for me, this is my personal experience. It is not a physical, that the soul lives on, that the death of the body is a physical death, but that the soul carries on and is still there and present for people. My anxiety,
I think religion
dissipated.
Religion is for a lot of people kind of gives them that solace, maybe. Religion, the going to heaven and feeling like there's an afterlife and feeling like death isn't final. But I think for a lot of people that isn't enough, and they have like anxiety. You can be religious and believe in things, but still you have that fear. Would you say that's true? A lot of people have that fear of dying, that it's final and it's over. and everything you love is gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'm not saying that I walk around now like, bring on death, I can't wait to die. Or God forbid something happened to my children. I mean, I can appreciate that there is nothing more painful than the thought of something happening to my children or, something, or my husband or, anyone in my family. But also the thought of them having to live without me is painful. But it is not the death that is scary. It's the feelings around the death that I think is more scary for people.
Right.
And when you can start to have some sort of sense of and make meaning again for yourself. I'm not purporting that the way that I believe what happens when you die is the way that it happens. I think that the point
You're
of
not
all
saying
of
this is fact. This is something that you're coming to terms with and learning about. Correct?
Exactly. And that when you can open up your consciousness to possibilities outside of one way of thinking, it can be extremely healing. And I've seen that with my patients when people come in who have experienced tremendous losses. I mean, I've worked with people who've lost children, spouses, parents, everything. That when we can explore what the meaning is of death and how they make sense of death and how they can think about loss, it frees people up in ways to really live.
Can they find peace?
Yes, but it's also about how you can live a really meaningful life in the face of death. Because that's guaranteed for all of us. Like, no one gets out of here alive. It's not happening.
Right.
No one's figured that out yet. But I bet there's a lot of money to be made in that business. But I think when you can deal with it, and Al, you saw it even in the short time we spent together exploring this, because you said before I talked to Grandpa Jerry, that even our conversation beforehand really shifted things for you a little bit and got you thinking about things differently.
It's true, but I have to be honest, though, in that those months in between our time together, I've kind of, I think, nudged back the other way and still have, that's just me. I have a lot of anxiety regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I need therapy. But
well, that's a topic for a different time, right?
Yeah, that's a topic for a different time. But I think, yes, and I think being there with you and discussing it and seeing it, it was very helpful to me to realize that love goes on and whatever that means. But I think people listening to this are going to wonder, do you believe there's an afterlife? Do you believe in a heaven? Where are these spirits that are giving you these messages? Mm-hmm. How are you getting these messages?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of this is I'm still not 100% sure. That's part of my exploration. Part of my passion for wanting to do this little project is to continue exploring these things, because it is very easy in our humanness, in our, everyday life and existence, to get caught up in the reality of what it means to be in a physical body. And to love deeply and care deeply. Every day I think about, oh my God, what if something happened to my children? But I don't let that paralyze me, because then I can go to that place of, but I know it will be okay because this is my belief system. So do I think that there's like a heaven and a hell? I don't really think of it that way. I think that we're here to learn lessons. We're always learning lessons. We're always trying to grow. And that you can either teach being a soul in a physical body, or you can teach being a soul from the other side. And how you progress and help all is part of your soul's work. And your soul just resides in a body for periods of time. So
do you think, millions and millions and millions of people have lived in this earth. Are all of their souls out there? How does that work?
I'm not sure. What do you mean by that? Are all?
Well, like you said, we live in a body. So, right. So, is every soul that was in a body at one point that's not in a body anymore somewhere out there? Or, you know what I'm saying? I'm looking for concrete again. I'm looking for evidence, right?
And I guess, I don't know the answer to that. What I know is that energy, equals MC squared. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. We are energy. So it has to go somewhere. I think that there's a lot of question marks and there's a lot we don't know. And we can't know if we're not having conversations about it. And we can't explore these things if we're not open and curious about hearing people's perspectives and experiences. I mean, since the beginning of time, people have had mystical, spiritual, near-death, past lives, all of those experiences. And they've reported them. And there's, amazing physicians who have had patients come back from the dead, and physicians who have experienced their own coming back from the dead, and, many doctors and therapists who have had patients experience past lives and things that just might not, or, there are things that do explain them. Again, part of what I want to explore here. But I think it's hard when you're in a human mind to conceptualize what it looks like because we're so concrete and we want things to be concrete. And so we want to know, soul goes to a place that looks like this. And at that place, they get their hair done, they get their nails done, they lay on a beach, right? Whatever your version of heaven is. That wouldn't be mine. Mine would, the beach part would be. But I don't think that it looks like that because you're not in a human body. So you're energy. Right. So it's just about being a light-filled, energetic being.
Huh. You have so much to explore.
Yes, I do. And I'm excited to do it.
I'm excited to listen. Well, thank you so much for having me on and let me ask you questions.
Oh my God, thank you. We've been trying to do this for a long, long time here, so I'm glad we finally fit it in just in the nick of time, I think, before the insanity of our kids and school starting and everything begins yet again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, Al.
Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Curious about what comes next and what it all means? You can subscribe on iTunes. Just go to podcasts and find Life, Death, and the Space Between and hit subscribe. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Amy Robbins. Ask me any questions you might have, let me know what else you'd love to hear about, or just share your story. I can't wait to hear from you.